parent anxiety is actually really, really high right now.
When you're thinking about like how you raise kids that are not assholes, what are those sort of big bucket traits that you don't want to end up in? I was really struck. I was reading this book, Hello, Cruel World by Melinda Wenner Moyer. Melinda is an award-winning journalist who explores the intersection of science and everyday life. We're all trying to navigate a world that is dark.
It makes it really, really, really hard to be a parent right now. Yeah. A willingness to embrace uncertainty is so important. People have said, is this really that bad of a time? You know, kids have gone through harder times, parents have gone through harder times. And I think that's true. But what we do know, too, is that parent anxiety is actually really, really high right now.
Yeah.
And it's higher than it has been in the past. So even if things aren't actually that terrible compared to how they've been in, generations past, I think parents are more worried. And that worry, that anxiety, that stress is, we know, just isn't good.
When I want to talk about parenting, but I just think this sort of timeless battle against the forces of assholery is like a major thing. I mean, I feel like that's the main job in life, is to get out by is to make it through and not become like them. Like I use this line, I liked it, but it was like, you can't let the sons of bitches turn you into a son of a bitch. Like you can't let them, those forces are there always, but it does feel like they're more empowered than ever. Mm-hmm. And certainly we hear that they are platformed more than ever.
Yep.
And how do you not let that affect you? And then also I think your job as a parent, of course, is to protect them from that as long as possible. But then this idea of like, how do you get out of life not being slowly worn down by these forces, and then you just go, wow, what the hell?
I know. Not becoming a total cynic.
Yeah.
Hopeless. Yeah. Yeah. I know. I wish I had the answer to that question,
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's really hard. But I do think, I mean, again, I relate everything to parenting, but I do think being a parent forces you to really push against that even harder for your kids, right? Because you're like, I can't fall into this like well of, dark well of cynicism for my children.
Well, I had Maggie Smith in here not that long ago.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what that poem, Good Bones, is about, is like the forced exercise in real estate agent level optimism of like, no, I think it has a ton of potential. It's like, it's a fucking dump, know? But like there's something about being a parent that gives you a stake in future generations and a desire to preserve some hope. Like this is what The Road is about also, the idea of like just keeping the fire or whatever, not doing it.
I just had dinner with my parents not too long ago, and they were both like, we're really worried about your kids, like really, really, really worried. It's just a terrible world. Everything's terrible. And my sister and I were like, we're trying to push back in our ways. Of course, also like there's just my sister and I want to align ourselves like against my parents, like the traditional roles you fall into when you get back together, right? And we're like, no, it's not that bad, but it is really bad. But it's not. But our kids are going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay. And like it was very a clear illustration of that, phenomenon you're talking about.
When you're thinking about like how you raise kids that are not assholes, or you're thinking about like what it means to be an asshole, what are the sometimes it's helpful to sort of define what you don't want to end up as, right? Like Ron Lieber's book about the opposite of spoiled. It's like, okay, we know what spoiled is, so we know, like when you think about like what are those sort of big bucket traits that you don't want to end up in, and certainly wouldn't want your kids to end up with. How do you think about those? Yeah.
Well, God, there's so many, right? Apathy is one. I think what's the opposite of compassion, right? Like just
narcissism or
yeah. I mean, certainly, I don't know if that's the opposite, but that is also something I do not want my kids to be. I want to be anti-narcissistic, right? I think there's something about just a lack of, or an inability to sort of consider others or put yourself in other people's shoes, right? So I that's really important to me, is my kids can think about other people and what they're going through and like be compassionate and empathetic. I think for me, having a kid who is, unable to try hard things, like a lack of resilience, that's to me, people might not think of it as like a form of, an aspect of assholery, but I kind of do.
No, because you're like, well, I can't do it. Do it for me.
Exactly.
There's a selfish, like a, what do they call it? Weaponized incompetence, like in relationships. That's like, yours like, well, take care of me. There's a burdensomeness to it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's putting it all on somebody else to do the work. And I think about that a lot with my kids because I also have a boy and a girl. And my son is definitely much more of the like, will you do this for me? I don't really want to do it. Whereas my daughter's like, I'll do it. I'll do it all.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh God.
This is where
here
it
is already. Yeah, exactly. 10 and 14. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There's like, an unwillingness to listen. I want my kids to be really good listeners. Like I want them to be curious too, like that.
Yeah. I
don't know whether you would consider that like a lack of curiosity as part of assholery, but I kind of do.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely, right? Yeah. Like total indifference to things that you don't know about or don't like, or yeah, of course. That's like honestly, now that you're saying it, that's kind of a defining trait.
Yeah,
like I wouldn't. Are there a lot of super curious jerks? You know, like they're because actually. What's interesting about some of these traits is how fundamentally they get you outside yourself, right? Like, so curiosity makes you not the center of attention, right? Because it's fundamentally rooted in empathy and interest, and there's a humility to it, and there's all these things that are just at odds with what we would, I think, define as being an asshole.
Yeah. I also think a willingness to embrace uncertainty and that's related to curiosity, is so important.
Yes.
Now, especially. And so I don't want my kids to think I have all the answers. I know everything. I don't need to reconsider my opinions on things. I don't need to reconsider my beliefs. I want them to be open-minded and willing to admit openly when they really don't know for sure about something. I think that's super important. It's really, really hard because we know that kids are seeing this behavior and the lack of consequences and learning from it. This is like social learning theory from the 60s. Like kids look to the behavior of powerful people and what they can get away with and how terrible, how many rules are they breaking? And then they say, oh, well, that's what I should do to be powerful. That's okay to do. It's a really, this is the question that keeps me up at night. Like,
No, like this is like a little town, and the mayor here is like mostly a ceremonial position, but there's like some real power. And anyways, the mayor like gets elected and then immediately has an affair with like the person running the tourism board, and then like refuses to resign. Like there's an investigation. Like is part of the affair? Does it also have to do with like was there actual corruption? Like were they using tourism funds to fund their liaisons or whatever? And maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. He argues he's cleared in this investigation. But like, you don't get to be the mayor of a small town. Like when 3 months into your term, you have an affair with another thing, right? Especially if you're, like running on some sort of conservative or Republican platform. That's what I would think, right?
Yeah.
But like, what do you, and obviously my kids aren't watching this because they're a little younger, but it's just like, what do you do when the sort of sense of shame or honor removed, and this is a bipartisan issue, unfortunately, but like, what do you do when that sort of mechanism by which you go, hey, I screwed up, I'm humiliated. Again, you don't have to move or, we're not going to put you in the stockade and throw fruit at you or whatever like they used to do. But like, you lost the moral legitimacy to be the chief executive of the town. That's just how life works.
Should be, yeah.
Right. And I think that's a real, like, we're all trying, I would say, regardless of our political persuasions, we're all trying to teach our kids that. And then we're having trouble as a society acting as if adults need to model that behavior. And that's like so baffling to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like the definition of bad behavior is shifting because of it, right?
Well, there's almost a moral inversion where like, we're like, oh, those bad people on that side that their people are casting out, let's embrace them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
It makes it really, really, really hard to be a parent right now. Yeah.
I think that's kind of where you start the book and where we have to start as people, which is like, at some level, you have to figure out not how you make that world different, but how do you accept that we live in a fundamentally fallen, fucked up, crazy world. Like that, the main skill is like, if the illogicalness and the outrageousness of it drives you insane, you're not going to make it. And if you allow it to corrupt and screw with your moral compass, you will end up also in a very bad spot.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I do think a lot of it is about, I mean, a lot of my book is about how do we help kids learn to navigate all of this messiness, this complexity, this uncertainty that is now in our world. And like, what can we do to instill in them a moral compass if everything they're seeing around them, hopefully in their homes, they're getting what, that's the key, right? But everything else is just, impossible to.
Although maybe like if everyone behaved well all the time and most people were decent and moral and our leaders never let us down and we were all aligned culturally, you wouldn't need a moral compass because there would be a map everywhere. You know, like the whole idea of needing a moral compass is because the world is very disorienting and there are temptations and distractions and false paths everywhere. Like you need a moral compass because you're going to have to find your own way.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And then we hope that if we can help instill that compass in our kids, then maybe it will swing back a little bit, right? And be a little less the way it is now.
Yeah, like
it's never going to be perfect, but yeah.
No, definitely not. But yeah, you obviously need it in dark times more than ever.
Yep.
And if they're not going to get it from you, who are they going to get this from?
Exactly. No, I think that's true. I mean, I think that makes what's happening, the conversations we have with our kids now, so much more important because we are the force that's able to give them this. I feel as though in so many ways we've lost the big picture for the details, and I think that's true in parenting. I think there's so much obsessiveness over, grades and little things like that feel so important to parents right now, all the checking off all the boxes of doing all the things that the other parents are doing and everything, and totally missing the bigger picture of like, okay, what kinds of conversations are you having about about the complexities of the world? And those are the things that really make our kids who they're going to be and help them, shape their decision making forever.
My oldest is obsessed with the Odyssey, and he has been for like 2 years. And so we've been talking a lot about it.
Of course he is.
Well, it's funny because there's a thing in Seneca where Seneca is talking about whether the Odyssey is real or not. And how even then, he's like, these instructors are like, well, did it happen here? Did it happen here? Or, what was this? And he's like, it doesn't matter. He's like, we're all Odysseus sort of on our own journey and sort of being buffeted by these storms and tempted. And he's like, that's the point of the Odyssey. And I think when my son was reading about it, and then he's like, do you think Homer was blind? And I was like, it doesn't fucking matter. That's not what this is about at all. Yeah. And let's get into the sort of meaty questions. And I think that's the purpose of all these texts and all these stories and all these lessons is like, what kind of person does this or that? Should you be that type of person? We're supposed to see ourselves reflected in these characters and then take back lessons for what kind of society we want to have and what kind of life we want to live.
Absolutely.
But that's hard to test. And that's unwieldy, I imagine, for a teacher and for parents. And maybe some parents agree or disagree with this interpretation. But like to be the kind of person who can consider those questions, that's what you're trying to raise. And that's how you get a kid who doesn't end up as an asshole is that they've thought about this and that they're not having to learn all these things by trial and error, but they're looking at the great stories and examples from history where like, we did this once and it didn't work well. Like we have these rules because X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
The big distinction now is like all these sort of messy things are a lot less simple than like YouTube videos, which they're all kids are obsessed with. And every once in a while I talk to a parent, they're like, we don't do YouTube. And I go, okay, but the rest of us are. So how do you, it's also tricky when it's like, look, if, Mr. Rogers was trying to build certain moral questions and lessons into his work. I'm not sure Blippi is doing that. No offense. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference between seeing yourself as a continuation of this tradition and then seeing yourself as serving the algorithm, which unfortunately I think most creators are doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, there's not a lot of great, thoughtful, thought-provoking content out there on YouTube. It's just that, but then that's yet another reason why we have to be, facilitating these conversations at home, right?
How do you think about that?
How do I think about having the conversations?
Yeah, well, how do you do it? I mean, I'm sure, unless you're like, no, our kids have never touched a smartphone.
Oh God, no. Yeah, no, my son has a phone. My daughter doesn't have one yet, but she's got an iPad, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times they bring it to me with, I saw this thing on YouTube and I learned this thing. And usually I am, instantly skeptical of whatever it is that they heard or learned usually for good reason, right? And I try to like hold back on the like, well, where'd you hear this? This doesn't sound right. Like what's your source? Like, I try to ease up on the judgmentalness initially and say, that's interesting. I usually start with like, that's interesting, huh? Like, where'd you hear that? Or where'd you learn that? And then they say, and I say, okay, well, I'm really like, it's really about, for me, getting them more curious, right? About it. So you heard this thing, or you saw this thing, or you learned this thing. Let's think about like, where did you get the information? Can we trust that person or that source of information is something that would want to give you accurate information and would be able to give you accurate information? Could they have an agenda? Could they want you to think a certain way about this instead? So it's a lot of like just gentle sort of nudges of like, could it be different from what you think it is? And how do we know? And how certain can we be? There's a woman that I interviewed and she had this great way of helping kids like consider their sense of certainty about something, which is like on a scale of 1 to 100, how sure are you that this is true? Oh. And she said, the great thing is most kids won't say like 100%, I'm 100% sure, but they might say like 90%, even if it is something that's not true. But you can then say, okay, so what is it that gives you that 10% feeling that maybe it's not true? Right. And like get in that way and sort of, it gives them the chance to reflect on why they might not be totally certain, what could they do to feel more certain, I'm also a big fan of like jumping on Google with kids, like, yes.
Like how do you, I've been thinking about that too. Like, so what they're coming to you with is an expression of interest in something that they weren't interested in before, or that they didn't even know existed. And then how do you show them how to fall down that rabbit hole? Like, oh, okay, you like Hamilton, so, well, here's like a biography we could listen to. We're going to New York City. He's buried there. Like, how do you take the sort of flicker of interest or attention and sort of fan it into a thing, right? Like, because they don't fully understand or have the skills yet to do it, but you're teaching them those skills in the process of going like, let me indulge your fascination in this thing by showing you the endless amounts of ways you can continue to learn about it. It's like, it's like, oh, you like this musical? There's like parodies of this musical. Like, so now we're learning about like satire, and now you're learning what Saturday Night Live is. Like, how do you sort of take this thing and go, let me show you the meta skill of like getting to the bottom of this thing that you're interested in, which is travel, which is reading, which is asking questions, it's all of that.
Yeah.